Hey, it's Dave
and Dan,
and welcome to another episode of Hooked on Headwaters. Hey Dan, it's been a while.
It's been a little bit.
It's been a little hiatus there, but hey, we're glad to be back, and we're hoping to get more into rhythm and bring you more videos and more content and good information on a regular basis. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about Headwaters Lake, favorite place to fish.
Okay.
So what's going on out there, Dan? What's the lake look like? What's conditions out there?
You know what's been going on. I just got back into town 2 days ago. I was playing hooky. I was actually deer hunting in Alabama. So.
Yeah, check these out.
Yeah, I got a couple nice photos there for you guys. We had a really good time. Me and 3 friends we went up there and had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
Except it was cold. The first morning we hunted, it was 14 degrees.
Hey.
Second morning was much more. It was much warmer. It was at 16. Yeah. So it was a little chilly. So Headwaters now. We have this thing this season. You know, when I say season, this time of year, this is our busy season. But we have about 18 to 20 inches more water than we did 12 months ago.
Yeah.
And that has changed some things.
It's been a wet winter.
Very wet. Yeah. Very wet. Yeah, a lot of rain.
We just had a long spill there of water.
Yeah, and we're supposed to have some more rain next week. Yeah. But with fronts, the fronts are not coming through like they normally do. A lot of them are stopping. Either they're hanging out over the top of us, or they're not coming all the way down. Yeah. So it's a little bit different year. Yeah. So for sure, it's changed a lot of things. Yeah. So with the excess of water, it makes a difference for where the fish are, how the grass is growing, and something a lot of guys are talking about is floating islands in the S Canal. It's constantly, we're seeing stuff on social media. Yeah. Hey, how's the S Canal looking? And that's kind of a loaded question, because it can literally change from the time you run out to the time you run back in. I was out last week, ran out, and I had to pick my way through. I came back in, the canal was completely open. Yep. So most of those floating islands, the water hyacinth that are only, you know, this high off the water, you can idle through those. Sometimes I'll run through them if I know there's no big floating things in it. The things that have bushes growing in them, you're not running through that. You need to
those are rooted. They're kind of rooted in that. Yeah, the roots are. There's basically, it's a floating island. The roots have grown into this big mud. We call them a mud tussock. Yep. And when the water rose higher from years ago when they flooded, these things ripped up out of the bottom and floated. And now we have these lovely things floating around. Some things you can do, sometimes they'll almost completely block the canal. You can usually go push your way around them. Be careful, because it's shallow on the edges of the canals. You want to trim up. Last week I had to move one to get back in. Actually, I nosed up to it and I kind of rolled it out of the way. But you got to be patient. Just put it in gear, push slowly. If you try to force it too much, you're going to end up on top of the mat, and that's going to be more troublesome. So it's not a super big deal. I don't think anybody's been stuck out overnight yet. So. And that happened. I was out with a buddy, Mozzie. This was a year ago, and we tried to go over an island, and guess what? We wind up having to get out of the boat and pushing the boat over. So be careful when you.
Not the greatest thing to walk on, because a lot of them you'll just go right through, and then you're underneath this floating island. So
how's this affecting the fish?
Well, there's several things besides the high water that's affecting the fish, but I'll start with that. So the high water, in my opinion, has changed some things. I think the fish are still going to spawn in the same general areas, but it's going to cause the grass to grow differently. So now, or not be as tall or topped out. I'm talking mainly hydrilla here, guys. It's not going to be topped out in the areas. I noticed some of the areas I've been fishing where there was no grass, I'm starting to see the grass get closer to the surface. Typically, coming into January, the grass is already topped out and starting to kind of die off. So that's going to change some things, and it has changed some areas that I've been fishing. The floating islands have changed I think I've changed one of my areas. So that can be troublesome. And with that extra 20 inches of water, if you're trying to sight fish, it's going to make it that much more difficult, which I honestly have yet to be on a sight fishing day where I can go and see fish on beds. Not that I'm saying I haven't done it. I've caught fish off of beds, but to go try to sight fish is for me right now. There may be somebody else that's figured it out, but I see a lot of beds right now with no fish on them.
Right.
So I'm sure the fish are somewhere in that general area, and that's where we should be fishing right now.
Are they staging, or what do you think?
Well, I think we have fish in all three parts of the spawn. We have some that's already spawned.
Yep.
We have some in the spawn, and I think we have some that are pre-spawn. And the reason I say that, all the way back in November, one of my good shiner locations, where I was catching fish on shiners, so make that clear, I had a lot of fish with big bellies. Almost everyone was full of roe. And then into December and January, I've noticed a lot of the fish I'm catching don't have those bellies. I'm still getting some, but you know, we're only kind of getting near the end of January. February is usually the month, and it'll go all the way. The spawn will go all the way into March. So that's why I'm saying I think we have them in 3 different stages of the spawn, like a pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. So keep that in mind when you're hunting around for fish. A lot of them. That's what they're in that mode, either post-spawn, spawn, or pre-spawn. So
really important what Dan said is that this is gonna happen, or it's gonna occur through March, even.
I've seen beds as late as April.
See that? So there's time for those of you who want to fish down here. There's
plenty of time. Plenty of time. Yeah, a lot of you guys from up north, you're way up north. I think I've heard the spawning window's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. A very narrow window. Florida, it's like a wide open cattle gate. You know, that's how long it is. Sometimes I'll fish in areas that I don't really think the fish are spawning, and I still catch them because those fish are kind of in transition. So some of the other things that happen on the lake right now, we talked about grass growth, but back months ago there were some areas that were sprayed with herbicide for the water hyacinth, and it killed the hydrilla as well, and those fish, I think they moved out of the area, or I just hadn't figured them out. So that's narrowed down a lot of the areas that I really like fishing, and I think that's also increased pressure in other areas because other guys are finding the same thing I'm finding.
If you pull up, so here's what happened to me just a few weeks ago. I went to a lake, local lake, pull up, and I see the brown. And when you see, I mentioned it today, when you see the hyacinth browned out, it's not good. I ventured out anyway. I was in my kayak and caught 0 fish. So, and it was certainly nuked.
We call them nuked because they roast everything.
They did.
So I was actually talking with a guy that last week that works for St. John's, because I wanted to know a little bit more about it, and I called to have a conversation with him. I was going to talk about the blockages and things. Turns out he's in Palatka, and super nice guy, extremely helpful. He turned out he was a fisheries biologist for St. John's, and he doesn't really care for the way some of the spraying is done. And throughout our conversation, I stated, guys, we have to spray some. If we don't spray, we won't have any lakes in Florida left. The water hyacinth is so prolific and grows so fast. If you don't spray it, it will literally take over the entire lake. But in that discussion with the fisheries biologist, he agreed with that statement. Yes, there's no good way of handling it. Mechanically, it's just overwhelming. But he did say, I just don't understand. Like there was another lake in Florida. He said they sprayed 9,000 acres. He says that's not good. It's not good for the fish. It's not good for the catching fish. It's not good for the lake. And maybe over time these things will work out to where maybe they'll go in and spot spray and just hit a few things. But that's a whole nother conversation that people get really fired up about.
Both sides.
Just remember, if you do call your people that work at the St. John's, be nice to them because they're trying their best. They have to follow directives from higher ups. So please be nice to them, because a lot of times they catch a lot of grief that they really don't deserve.
Absolutely. So let's move on a little bit. So I'm an artificial guy, especially on a kayak. So Dan, tell me, what's the one lure I should be fishing with?
Well, this time of year, if you things get tough, they can be tough, especially with cold fronts. I would say a Senko, or we'll call it a stick bait, a Senko style bait.
Right.
I really, really like that bait. You can catch big fish on it, you can catch little fish on it, and catch lots of fish on it. It has pros and cons. Those are the pros. You know, another pro of it is it's more of a finesse style fishing when the fishing's tough. So that's a pro, but you don't have to fish it, you know, just because you're fishing a finesse bait does not mean you have to throw it on 6-pound line. So I brought a Senko style bait, and the colors I like in this area, I like a natural color, just almost all the time. Whether, like this one happens to be watermelon red, I like watermelon gold, I like straight watermelon, and pumpkin, or pumpkin with some flash, something like that in it. It depends on how clear my water is. If I got super clear water, I typically like just straight watermelon. If I can see, you know, a bed 40 feet away over there, I know the water's pretty clear, so I'll go with it more as natural as possible. So my setup, what I fish this bait on, or here, you hold that, Dave. And if you want, we can do a close-up of it as well.
Go.
So what I like to fish, I've got 20-pound braid with a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader. I like the fluorocarbon because typically, if I'm throwing a Senko this time of year, I'm fishing in areas where the fish, I believe, are bedding. And the water is typically clearer where the fish are bedding, and other people see those beds, so they might have some pressure. So I'll fish a fluorocarbon leader. You can go straight to your braid if you want to. This is how I do it. Typically, on a day that's not super windy, I'll fish it with just a hook. This happens to be a Gamakatsu Superline 3/0 EWG hook, extra wide gap. I like this hook. I've caught hundreds and hundreds of fish on it. Pick your favorite hook. I just rig it like you would you call it text post or skin hook. So I'll put it through there. I slide my worm all the way up and around and cover the eye of the hook. Okay. Then I call it skin hook, and I think some people call it text posing. I kind of measure about where the hook's going to go through the worm, and I go straight through the body of the worm. Now, this is what we have right now. We have the hook point still hanging out. So I'm going to slide my worm back up, and I'm going to grab the body of the worm, and I'm going to push up and out. That's a little exaggerated there, but just to give you the idea of the motion. I'll lift up and out, and now look at that. We have no point of the hook.
Weedless presentation.
Yeah, it's a nice weedless presentation, but if the fish bites it, it pops, the hook point just pops right out. Very, very effective bait. I fish this slow. I call it dead sticking, just like I do it sometimes with my flukes. I'll fish a fluke in the same area as I do the Senko. I like this around areas with pockets in hydrilla. I like casting up to edges of cattails. It's kind of like almost like I fish with this more visually instead of just fan casting, which I will do sometimes. If I know there's multiple beds in the area, I'll fan cast. But I like to target fish with it, where I know a bed is, where there's a hole in the hydrilla, there's a stand of cattails, and I'm pretty certain there's fish around that. I like to like a target. That's my target of where I want to cast this thing to, and I'll fish it, and it can be very, very effective. Now on windier days, it's a little breezy today, but it's not super windy. Typically I fish, like I was saying, I prefer it weightless anytime. I always prefer it weightless because it tends to fall horizontally.
More.
So I'll go up to, if I'm fishing these targets, I'll go up to an 1/8 ounce weight, a little bullet weight. I typically don't go much heavier than that, unless it's really blowing, 20, 25. This is a little bitty, I don't know if you can see it, guys, little bitty bullet weight, an 1/8 ounce weight. You don't need much to get this thing to sink,
16th.
Yeah, you can go down to a 16th. I only use enough weight to do get it to do what I want it to do. If the only reason I use weight is if the wind is blowing enough to where it blows my bait away from where my targeted cast. That's how I like to do it. Yep. Again, 20-pound braid with a line-to-line knot to 20-pound fluorocarbon. I definitely prefer the fluorocarbon. I think I get more bites than just tying straight braid. Could be wrong. I know a lot of guys catch them on straight braid.
Yep. Yep.
That's just how I do it, and because I do it that way, everybody should do it that way. Just kidding.
It's also a good, when I'm not using it as a primary bait, it's a great second or the follow-up bait.
Yeah.
So if I'm working a worm or another lure, type of lure, and I'm getting bites, maybe missing a few, boom, follow up with a Senko.
Yeah, like a top water.
Like a top water. Yep, been missing, follow up. Great follow up.
That's a good
been very
tip right
successful with that as well.
I have heard years ago, and then we'll move on so we don't make a long video. Years ago, there was two guys that older guys fished tournaments together.
Yeah.
One guy loved fishing a top water, the other guy loved fishing a worm. And what they would do, the guy in the front of the boat would fish the top water. If he had a blow up and a miss, his partner would immediately throw there with a Texas ringworm, and they caught a lot of fish. So that's another tip. Keep it to yourself. Don't tell anybody. So.
All right, and so let's come to the end here. I want to give a kayak fishing tip. Create yourself a float plan. In other words, let someone know if you're going on a kayak where you will be, approximately what time you're going to launch, and check in with that person or two. I usually use Dan, my wife certainly, and Dan. I'll let them know where I'm at, where I'm going. Keep an eye on the weather. Yes. All the time. I mean, check it every hour, every 30 minutes. Be aware what's heading your way. I mean, if you're fishing, kayak fishing Headwaters Lake, you need to be aware of your surroundings when it comes to these floating islands.
Yes.
We spoke about it earlier. I have been in nooks fishing. I've turned around and I've been closed in. Yeah. Now I've been fortunate. I've been able to push myself over the island, but my secondary plan was to call him and have him tow me out. Yeah. But you fish lakes like Headwaters, you really need to be careful. If you fish those nooks, be aware of those islands. They could trap you. So once again, let folks know where you are, and let folks know when you get off the lake. I try and let Dan and my wife know, hey, I'm off the lake, I'm heading home, so they know. Always have a way to communicate. You have a portable VHF. You make sure you have your phone, and use phone charge. The power packs, they're really cheap, and if you get jammed up, you've got extra power to connect your phone. And if you're, one last thing, if you're running out of juice on your phone, make that last call. Let that person know, hey, I am here, this is my location, I'm going to run out of juice soon, so come get me. So in case you lose power, at least they've heard from you and know where you are.
Yep. Okay.
So that wraps up this video. Thanks to Captain Dan.
Thank you.
Hey, it's that time here. It's primo time. So you need looking to book a trip, give this guy a call. Like we said, man, February, March, even April, that spawn is still, the big gals are out roaming. So book your trip if you're looking to do something a little different, fish on a kayak, a little unique experience. You give me a shout. I do both, as you know, I do both bass and saltwater trips.
Do you do paddle trips too?
And I do paddle trips. So if you want to just go out on a photography trip, or just check out the lake, be happy to take you out as well.
We're coming in. We were talking about earlier. We're coming into season for the birds.
All the birds, the spoonbills will be here. Those are the big, pretty pink birds. So if you're looking to do something like that, check us out. That said, so long everyone. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.